our session set up here as we catch up across our streaming platforms. So, today we're talking about the impatience spiral and how so often we're in this self fulfilling prophecy where the very way we're trying to get out is the process that's keeping us stuck. So, we'll give it a moment to begin here. We'll give a moment for people to start coming in. Here we are. Yeah, taking some time to check in. Happy Friday, y'all. It's been a little while. We didn't have our session last week, so I'm glad to know that y'all are here today. Welcome. Here we go. Yeah, we're talking about impatience. This tendency, not only for ourselves, but culturally, to feel this pressure and to find ourselves in this area where there's so much pressure to get things done, and we want to escape that anxiety. We want to escape that overwhelm. And so what we do is we try to get more done, which causes more anxiety, which causes more overwhelm, and just continues this endless process of exhaustion. I remember I was talking to my therapist one time, telling him about this cycle. And one of the things he kind of said to me is, it's like, well, John Paul, it sounds like you need to downregulate. It sounds like when you get stressed, you want to get more work done. And it sounds like that leads to this impatience spiral. He says, like, it sounds like you actually need to slow down. And my reaction was like, dude, I can't do that. That's terrifying to me. I can't slow down because there's this part of me that's afraid that if I slow down, I'm just going to get more behind, or there's going to be more things to do, or I'm going to lose grip on things more. And this is a cycle that's just, I think, rampant in our culture. Certainly my culture. It's busyness is the norm. Having too much to do is the norm. But the way that we respond to having too much to do isn't typically to recognize that it's impossible. Rather, when we feel that there's too much to do, we double down with our attempts to do more than we possibly can. And then when we don't do that well, we kick ourselves for it. One of the common ways that I see this show up in therapy with my clients is what we call a polarization. In internal family systems theory, we see these different parts of us. And there's this one part of us that wants to get things done, that wants to be productive, that wants to make sure that everything goes according to plan and we don't slip up on anything and we don't make any mistakes. And then there's another part of us that can be kind of the depressive part of us. We have this anxious part of us that's trying to execute. And then we can have this depressive part of us. And this depressive part of us is just saying, like, I'm exhausted. I can't keep going. I need a break. And so we can polarize back and forth between these. Some weeks, this part of us that's depressed is in the driver's seat. And it just feels like we're dead. It just feels like we don't want to do anything. It just feels like we can't move forward. Because what we're feeling is the exhaustion of years of never being allowed to take a break. And then maybe it flips and this anxious part of us takes over and says, oh my gosh, look at all the time that I lost in that depressive. I need to grab on. I need to go harder. I need to get things done. I need to execute. And that just causes more exhaustion. And so these polarizations, I certainly feel this with getting things done. These polarizations emerge in order to try to protect us. And when we discover what they're trying to protect us from, well, we can actually kind of bring healing to that part. And so let's get into the chapter here because he talks about this. He talks about this at one point, that this addiction to achievement, this addiction to getting things done, this addiction to speed, and this addiction to productivity, it's actually the symptom. It's not the problem. Our addiction to getting things done, our feeling of busyness, our feeling that we need more and more and more to do, we approach it as a solution. But it's actually a symptom of a deeper problem, of a problem of where we put our worth, of a problem of not having emotional boundaries. We can absorb the anxiety around us in our society and then take that on as our own. especially if we're emotionally sensitive, we can become enmeshed without even realizing it with the people around us and realize like, oh yeah, I do need to get more done. And there's a great question. It's like, do I want to live like that? I don't. I'm trying to change it. It's pretty damn hard. And so I want to ask you to reflect for yourself, like what are the polarizations in terms of productivity? What are the wrestling matches that you find? Are there parts of you that are trying to get everything done? Are there parts of you that just want to break? And where are the places where you find yourself in that friction? Here, one of the things that Berkman talks about in this chapter on the impatient spiral in our book. I don't know if I even said that we were starting here yet today. We're reading 4,000 Weeks, Time Managed for Mortals. You can comment book study or book club if you want to join. We're reading chapter 10, The Impatience Spiral. And one of the things that Berkman talks about is that we as a culture are developing this cultural impatience. But there's a paradox that the faster things get and the more effective our time management abilities become, actually the more stressed we become. Right? Now that you can, microwave make food in 30 seconds, well, it feels like a terrible thing to have to make food for an hour. We're getting closer and closer to effectiveness, and the more effective we become, the more we think we can transcend our limits, as he says. But he talks about how Taoism approaches this. He says, the Tao Te Ching is full of images of suppleness and yielding. The wise man is like a tree that bends instead of breaking in the wind, or like water that flows around obstacles in its path. Our task is not to change reality, but to learn to work with it flexibly. Yet, the phenomenon of pointless honking when we're impatient in traffic and this desire to get reality to go on our timetable says that we're usually pretty bad at this flexibility. We feel as humans as though it's our right to have things move at the speed that we desire. And the result is that we make ourselves miserable. Not just because so much of our time is spent feeling frustrated, but because when we're yelling at the world to move faster, it actually is counterproductive. He says, for example, traffic research long ago established that the impatient driving behavior tends to slow you down because as you inch forward towards the car in front of you while waiting at a red light, then you actually decrease the space. So when the traffic can actually move again, you have to do that more disjointedly. The quicker we try to go, oftentimes, the slower we become. And this is something that I've noticed in my own life. I have ADHD, and so it's so easy for me to kind of get caught off in things. And a commitment that I'm making for myself right now is to stop doing things real quick. I can get myself in this trap where I say like, okay, there's a lot of things to do. Well, let me just do this thing real quick. Okay, well, let me just do this thing real quick. I'll get a little bit ahead, right? Okay, there's this video that's loading. Let me just type this thing up real quick. And what I realize is that there's so many things that I try to do real quick that are actually just clogging. And it's a desire for me to escape this feeling of impatience, to escape the feeling of being limited and allowing things to take the time that they take. And so I'm really trying to commit here to just only doing things that are slow, which is a funny way to think about it. Because I realize that the opportunity cost of doing things quickly is my sanity. I don't want to live my life in this constant fear of tension of trying to feel like I need to get things done, trying to get ahead, trying to execute. Rather, I want to let go and say, like, I'm going to let life play out at the pace that it takes. And so here he talks about this sense that the faster things become, the more effective things become in our society, the more impatient we're becoming. And he says at the bottom of page 163, this is another mystery, though. that's illuminated when you understand it's a form of resistance to our built-in human limitations. Impatience is a form of resistance to our built-in humanity. The reason that technological progress exacerbates and makes worse our feelings of impatience is that every new advance makes it feel like we're closer to transcending our limits. It seems to promise that this time, finally, we might make it so we can go fast enough to not feel out of control. That we can go fast enough so that we can feel a complete control of our life, of time. And so every reminder that we aren't able to achieve such a level of control over time makes us feel even more unpleasant than before. And so not only personally are we increasing more impatience, but as a society, we are increasing in expectations for how long things should happen. Even things like waiting a few moments at the store for someone to help us out, waiting at a cash register, waiting at a light, waiting for somebody to respond to a message, waiting on the phone. We are so inundated in this energy of doing. And it's just burning us up to a crisp. One of the ways that he talks about this really showing up is reading itself. That our rates of reading are just drastically dropping. Because we want to feel this rush that we're effective, that we're getting to some point in the future where everything's okay. And that's just not reasonable. And so he talks about how this addiction to speed parallels alcohol addiction. He says that alcoholism is fundamentally a result of attempting to exert a level of control over your emotions that you can never attain. Our addictions are attempts to exert level of control over the emotions within us that we can never attain that level of control. And then it becomes a part of a cycle. And just so with productivity, just so with getting things done, just so with this feeling of impatience. The more we avoid, the more we become afraid of that which we have to confront. The more we avoid our limitations and try to get over or out from under them or around them, the scarier it is to feel them. And this is how anxiety works. This is how social anxiety works. This is how PTSD works. When we feel anxious to go somewhere, okay, that anxiety is rising. And if we say, I feel anxious to go out, you know what, I'm just going to stay inside. What happens is that anxiety immediately drops. But the next time we think about going and seeing somebody, the next time we think about going out in public, the anxiety spikes up quicker and higher than before. And so the more we avoid, the higher the anxiety spikes. And then when we say, you know what, I'm just not going to go there, our anxiety falls. And so the anxiety spikes up even quicker, and the relief falls down even more rapidly when we avoid it. And it creates this cycle. And it doesn't give us the experience and the opportunity to see that, okay, I'm nervous about going out. If I go out and if I face this thing that I'm avoiding, what will happen is my anxiety is going to spike, and it's going to keep going, and it's going to keep going. And then at some point, it's actually going to soften. It's going to flatline, and it's going to start to go down. And the inverse is true. Just like when we avoid something, the anxiety spikes quicker the next time. When we face something, the anxiety spikes slower the next time. And so when we repeatedly face these things, these situations that we're afraid of, when we stay in these situations that we're afraid of long enough to see like, oh, it's actually okay, then our anxiety comes down and we get to grow in confidence. And this is true with our limitations. But in our society, what we've started to do is that we feel anxious about not being enough, so we try to do more, and then usually what we do is we get praise from people for being productive, for doing so much, for having it all together. All while on the inside we're falling apart. And he says here in this comparison of looking at productivity as an addiction. An addiction, just like an addiction to alcohol. The basic mechanism is the same. As the world gets faster and faster, we come to believe that our happiness, our financial survival, depends on our being able to work and move and make things happen at a superhuman speed. We grow anxious about not keeping up. So to quell the anxiety, to try to achieve the feeling that our lives are under our control, we move faster. But this moving faster to quell the anxiety of feeling left behind leaves us and generates more of this addictive spiral. We push ourselves harder to get rid of the anxiety. And the result is that we actually feel more anxious. Because the faster we go, the clearer it becomes that we'll never succeed in getting ourselves or the rest of the world to move as fast as we feel is necessary. Then we suffer the effects of moving too fast. We struggle at work. Our relationships fall through the cracks. Our diets plummet. We don't take care of ourselves. And yet, the only thing that feels feasible as a way of managing all of our anxiety is to move even faster. You know you must stop accelerating. And at the same time, it feels like you can't. I can relate to that. I'm sure you can too. You know you need to slow down. And yet it feels like the very act of slowing down is the thing that you want to flee from. In AA, they talk about reaching rock bottom, which is to say that things get so bad that you're no longer able to fool yourself. Unfortunately, I think this is harder in our society because our society is constantly promulgating and encouraging productivity, getting more done. Because our society has this collective shadow, this collective exile of feeling like we need to justify our existence. And the feeling of needing to justify our existence just drives us to going faster and trying harder and doing more, which leaves us like we can't do anything, increasing this feeling of needing to justify our experience, our existence. So we feel that we need to justify our experience. One part of us is trying to drive faster and faster and faster. Another part of us is feeling more tired and more tired and more tired. And part of the solution here is to realize that the problem isn't trying to work so hard, trying to work so fast. The problem isn't hyperproductivity. The problem is that there's a hurt that productivity and speed and effectiveness is trying to protect us from. If you try to just slow down, you say, oh, I just need to slow down. You just try to put more effort into that. It's going to come to a grinding halt because you're going to meet this feeling of worthlessness. And so the solution isn't to just slow down. The solution is to ask, what part of me holds the feelings of pain that speed protects me from and keeps me away from? What parts of me are underneath the escape that productivity gives me? I know for me, there's parts of me that feel like they need to prove their worth. Young parts of me that want to feel safe. Young parts of me that want to feel connected. Young parts of me that want to feel approved of. The reality is that I'm actually at a place where those feelings don't actually line up with where I'm at. And so what I need to learn to do is turn towards, and I do this more and more, turn towards these young parts of me that are hurting. It's not the parts of me that are protectively trying to achieve that are the problem. It's that there's a young, vulnerable part that's still hurting, that's been burdened by hurt that needs healing. One of the things that Berkman talks about too is this kind of cognitive recognition that we have to give up, to surrender to the reality that things just take the time that they take, and that you can't quiet your anxieties by working faster, because it isn't within your power to force reality's pace as much as you feel you need to. And because the faster you go, the faster you'll feel that you need to go. And so what needs to happen is the reality that the solution that these protective parts are trying to give us of getting more done is never going to succeed. And so we need a different type of solution. That different solution is learning to encounter the hurt parts of us that productivity is trying to rescue us from. This is a second order change, meaning that it's not an incremental improvement, but a change in perspective that changes everything. When you finally face the truth that you can't dictate how fast things go, you're allowed to stop trying to outrun your anxiety, and your anxiety can be transformed. Digging into a challenging work project that can't be hurried, is an act of choice and courage. Giving a difficult novel the time it takes to become a source of relish, you cultivate an appreciation for endurance, hanging in and putting the best foot forward. You give up on demanding instant resolution, instant relief from discomfort and pain, and you give up on magical fixes. You breathe a sigh of relief, and as you dive into life as it really is, without trying to get it to cooperate on your terms, you can have a clear-eyed awareness of your limitations. And you begin to acquire what has become the least fashionable, but perhaps most consequential of all superpowers: patience. Patience is not something that you do. Patience is what emerges when we step back from the doing. Patience is what happens when we realize that this part of us that's trying to achieve everything is doing so to protect us from hurt. When we can step back from that part of us, when we can step back from the hurt and allow ourselves to be here. There's a remarkable peace, strange peace, a paradoxical peace that comes when we simply allow everything to be the way that it is. Life's messy. My life's messy. I'm sure your life is messy. And there's things that we can do to help that mess and work with that mess, and things I think we should do. But we should do them in a way that honors the fact that everything is as it is. Rather than trying to push the rocks over, we learn to be like water and flow around the rocks. And so here, I want to invite you to allow everything in this moment. Just allow things to be the way that they are. As Carl Rogers says, the strange paradox is that it is not until I accept myself exactly as I am that I have the capacity to change. And this is the way life is. This is what patience is about. It's not until I take life on its terms exactly as it is that I actually have the capacity to do something about it. And so I want to welcome you to ask here and sit with this question of reflection. What do you feel most impatient about? What deadline or what life activity, what are you trying to push up? What are you trying to make fast? What are you trying to make happen more quickly? Where are the places in your life where you feel the most impatience? Notice these parts that are wrestling against life, that are wrestling against the present moment. We can ask, what are those parts trying to protect you from? And here, can we practice allowing everything to be exactly as it is? It doesn't mean that we like everything. It doesn't mean that we're accepting terrible things that happen in the sense of we're condoning them. It means we're accepting reality as it is. We're approaching reality on its terms rather than us trying to give the terms to reality. And we allow everything to be exactly as it is because it's already that way. And it's from this place of accepting the way things are that we can actually live fully and then respond in a way that actually aligns with our values. So thank you for being here so far. I'd love to hear the questions that you might have, the questions you have about impatience, anxiety, the ways that you feel these dynamics showing up. I'd love to hear, what things that we've talked about so far have stuck out to you. Where are the hardest places for you to be patient in life? Where are the places that you feel like you're wrestling against time or wrestling against constraints or wrestling against your limitations? And what feels really important, what feels most important here is asking, can you recognize that there's a part of you that's trying to escape through getting things done? A part of you that's trying to escape by accomplishing things? Can we ask, what feelings is that part of you trying to protect yourself from? What part of you is stuck with all these painful feelings that are trying to be escaped by another part of you trying to achieve? So please ask any and all the questions that you have here, and if you're interested in joining the book study, come at book club. We'll get you joined and signed up on the list. We have a question here. Please keep the questions coming in. I'm glad that you enjoy the conversation, Dasi. How do we know the difference between patience and stagnation? Yeah, in my experience, the question here that might be more helpful is, which parts of me are afraid of stagnation? Because one of the things that will stop us from patience is the constant fear that we're being stagnant. And so what I would ask is, what does stagnation mean to you? There are times in our life where things can feel stagnant. In my experience, slowing down, when we really slow down, there's a difference between slowing down as a way of escapism and slowing down as a way of aligning with reality. And it's true that we can try to escape. And so there might be parts of you that that are escape artists that try to escape situations by being stagnant, that want to just freeze everything up. But in my experience, rather than knowing, is this stagnation or is this patience, what I would ask is, what am I resisting right now? And what am I afraid of? I bet you'll find that there's a part of you that's really afraid of stagnation. And so you approach that part with curiosity. You say, well, what am I afraid would happen if I stagnated? And what you'll find is that there's other parts of you that are really hurt and stuck. Let me know, Dasi, if that's actually a clear and helpful answer, if that just makes things more confusing. How can I stop waiting for the perfect moment, but it never arrives? I think that this happens by first just recognizing there's a part of me that's scared. There's a part of me that's wanting to be rescued by some form of perfection. Again, I think, how do we stop waiting for this perfect moment? I think we turn inward with curiosity. We say, okay, there's this part of me that's waiting, that's hoping for the perfect moment. What are you hoping to be rescued from? That's what I would ask. If you are waiting for the perfect moment that never arrives, I would turn inward with curiosity and ask yourself, what will the perfect moment rescue me from? What beliefs about my moment, what beliefs about myself would the perfect moment alleviate? What feelings will the perfect moment get me out of? And that points us to a part of us that's burdened with pain and hurt. There's a part of us that has painful emotions, and another part of us is saying, I hope the perfect moment will come so all that will go away. What do we want to go away? The things that we want to go away are the encounters within ourselves that we're being called to have. When we can't stand a feeling, it's actually an invitation for self-compassion and love, because there's a part of us that's being hated. There's a part of us that's burdened with pain and hurt, that's trying to get pushed away by perfection. But if this part of us was actually healed, would we need the perfect moment? And so we can actually see that there's different parts of us, and the painful emotions that these parts of us have, that's not the part in itself. Parts of us get stuck with painful emotions. And when we turn towards these young parts with love and compassion and listen to their stories, oftentimes because they've never been able to tell their stories, they've never been met with empathy, they can release their burdens, so then we don't have to escape them anymore. Rescued by perfection is my stagnation bit. So good to have this conversation. I'm so glad. Yeah, what other questions and thoughts do y'all have here? Please keep them coming. What's the best way you detach from the outcomes of life? Man, this is a great question. For one thing, I would say it has to be practice. All this stuff, it's practice. This is not a one-time fix-all. This is not a mindset shift. For me, none of this works without daily practice. This is why I'm so committed to my morning routine. I kind of think myself a little bit like a monk. I go to bed at 8 p.m. each night. Even on the weekends, we usually go to bed early. I get into bed, I listen to an audiobook. I wake up at 5 a.m. Actually, this past week I haven't, because I've kind of been sick and thrown off. So I've actually been sleeping in this past week. But I kind of treat my life like I'm a monk, because it means that I have to say no to certain things, certain social things, other things. But I wake up, I move my body, I meditate for 30 minutes, I pray and I journal for 40 minutes. Because we need to have times that we're practicing these mindsets. And then again, Ian, I would ask myself, what parts of me are holding on to outcomes? And then I would use the downward arrow technique. And the downward arrow technique is just kind of to say like, okay, then what? So what parts of me are afraid of outcomes? Well, I'm afraid that things won't turn out the way that I want. Okay, and if things didn't turn out the way that I want, then what? Well, then I would feel alone. Okay, and if I was alone, then what? Well, if I was alone, I couldn't bear that feeling. That points us to the part of us whose pain the hope for outcomes is trying to avoid. And so we learn to turn towards that part with compassion and curiosity. Again, in all of this, what we're asking is, what am I running from? I heard this quote the other day, that all the things that we fear and all the things we want can be found within us. And so these parts of us that we're trying to flee, when we learn to encounter these parts with ourselves, everything changes. How can I find safe relationships when I'm repeatedly hurt by getting shamed again and again for my emotions by close people? You know, that question, I think, there's probably a lot more than I can answer right here and now about that question. One of the things I would say that's probably going to be pretty important is learning to distinguish who's safe and who's not. One of the things that we can fall into is that we can mistake familiarity with safety. And so people who are familiar, people who are used to interacting with, we can like show up for them very vulnerably. But I would say, I think part of it would be therapeutic work, like intentional work. But learning to actually protect yourself from relationships where you completely continue to get shamed, and learning to experiment in new relationships too. I would say one of the things like this that can be helpful is seeking out intentional groups, like groups of people, especially things like hobbies. I think that's one thing, is find people who enjoy the same types of things that you enjoy. And sometimes those can be especially powerful relationships to rebuild trust in. How can you differentiate between enjoying time alone and doing less and avoiding withdrawing? I'm so happy alone with my dog and small family, I'm not sure if this is contentment or avoidance. Yeah. I mean, honestly, that to me, Gracie, feels like something that like I would sit down with that and I would just journal about it. For like 5 days, I would sit down every day and I would sit with that question. Because I think what you'll find is that there's probably parts of you that really truly are content with it. There's probably parts of you that maybe want a little bit more. There's also parts of you that are afraid that it's avoidance rather than contentment. And the reality is, I think it's probably a complicated mix of both. So what I would say, Gracie, is this is in IFS what we call a trailhead. And a trailhead is an opportunity to learn more about ourselves. When we have this question and this emotion of a fear of maybe I'm being avoidant rather than content, we just turn that question inward and we follow the sensations and we explore it. You can, if you comment guide on one of my videos, there's a guide that I have for kind of how to do this. It's also on my YouTube. We explore, we turn inward, we do what's called the U-turn. And then what I would do is I would just sit down and I would say like, okay, what part of me feels content? What part of me feels avoidant? What part of me is afraid of my avoidance? And this is where I would ask, Gracie, which parts of me don't trust myself? Because that's what I can hear here. I don't think the issue is whether you're content or whether you're avoidant. I think the question and the issue here is like, okay, Gracie, which parts of you have learned that you can't trust yourself? And that, I think, will show a bigger picture. Yeah, please ask questions. How can we make peace with the things that we run from? Sit with them. We sit with them. We just learn to turn towards them over and over again. We learn to make friends with them. I'll say this, Ian. One of my favorite approach, the things that has actually helped me do this the most is journaling and mindfulness meditation. So mindfulness meditation, I love the Waking Up app. I love Henry Shookman. Henry Shookman is my favorite meditation teacher. He has a series on YouTube for free. That's where I would start. I would start with cultivating a practice of intentionally sitting down and saying, hey, I'm just going to learn with baby steps how to make peace with the things that I run from. So thank you all. If there's if you're interested in our book study, please comment book study. If you're interested in the guide on how to connect with these parts, I don't know if it's actually set up for this comment section, but if you comment guide on one of my videos, any of my videos, it will send you an automatic, or it's on my website too, so you can find it there. Yeah, one more question here. Let's see. Moving forward, is there anything I can tell myself to get over the time and opportunities lost due to depression? I would say that I need to grieve. I need to actually feel the loss. So I would actually say that it's not about getting over the time and opportunities that you lost due to depression. I would say that it's actually the time to say like, man, there actually were things that were lost. And I feel sad about that. And so I'm actually going to have to say, hey, I'm going to have to grieve that and process that loss as something that I won't get back, as a part of this being human life. Like, it is a loss. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world, but it is a loss. We don't have to be afraid of loss when we learn how to grieve. And oftentimes that can be a very healing part for depression as well. So if you're interested, y'all, thank you so much for being here. I really love the questions. We'll be back on next Friday. I'm so grateful, Ian. I'm so grateful, Daffodils. Please know that you guys bringing your questions here. There were a few others. Dasi, thank you all so much for bringing your questions. Keep bringing them. We'll be back next Friday. Again, we'll be reading chapter 11 in, can we get this on there? 4,000 Weeks, Time Managed for Mortals, a book that really changed my life, has helped me to come to terms with my own limitations and to practice this practice of becoming radically human. It is we do these each week at 12:15 EST on Fridays. And there's an email that goes out too. So if you'd like to get the email, if you'd like to get a recording of this and all the others as well, that's on my YouTube. But I send out an email with a reflection and some reflection questions on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. So come at Book Club if you're interested. Thank you so much for being here, and take good care. And we'll continue to learn and practice embracing our limitations. All right, y'all. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. Keep practicing becoming more radically human. And